Good morning. How's everyone doing? Good. I'm excited to be here all the way from the great state of Kansas to talk a little bit about how we can save for people with disabilities, their family members, and caregivers. Just a little bit more about background about me. For this and my role and several of the roles that I have, this work is deeply personal. I started off in the disability community 22 years ago working as a direct support provider to a young woman who had a dual diagnosis of Down syndrome and autism. You can see Casey up here, and throughout my presentation, just bear with me, my hairstyle changes several times throughout a lot of these pictures and throughout of the stories that I'll tell and share about the ABLE program and the ABLE landscape over the last 22 years. I started working with Casey the summer after my freshman year of college, and through what became a summer job really turned into my life's work. I really got to know Casey for who she is, not because of her diagnosis of Down syndrome, but for who she was as a person. I got to know her family and her siblings and those who support her, and I started to ask questions. I started to ask her mom, why does the Social Security Administration call every single year and ask if she still has Down syndrome? It's pretty crazy. They still do that, by the way. I started to ask her mom, as she was preparing for the transition from junior high to high school and then what would happen after she turned 18 and 21, why could she save only $2,000 to remain on benefits? And I started to ask questions like, why do we, and this was 2001, so fast forward 22 years ago, why do we have all of these programs designed for people with disabilities that prevent them from working and saving money? Essentially, means-tested programs that are designed for people living in poverty. We had never modernized the system for people with disabilities. Just a little bit more about Casey and our lifelong friendship. In 2008, 2009, her dad developed terminal cancer, passed away, and her sister and I stepped in as her legal co-guardians with her mom as her mom got older. In 2021, January of 2021, right before the vaccine came out, Casey was living in a group home, a congregate care setting in Lenexa, Kansas, not too far from where I live now, and developed COVID and pneumonia and passed away. So we had been preparing for her life's journey through the current system, and she's still the reason that I do the work that I do today, and I've fought so hard to help pass legislation like the ABLE Act and continue to fight for the rights of people with disabilities in Kansas and really all across the country. It's because of Casey that eventually, after I moved to this crazy town, I lived in DC for about 15 years, that I had the opportunity to go work for the National Down Syndrome Society. I ran our policy and our advocacy center, so I planned a number of these Hill events that you're getting ready to embark on over the next day or so in my lifetime, and I had the opportunity to work with parents and family members and professionals, and most importantly, self-advocates all across the country. One of those amazing self-advocates that I had the chance to work with, you see her here, Sara is from Moscow, Pennsylvania. Similar to a lot of families that I'm sure you work with, Sara lost her mom to terminal cancer, to brain cancer, as we were fighting for the passage of the ABLE Act. She ended up becoming the face of this legislation on Capitol Hill and all across the country. So I'm not going to do this story justice and talk about the need for the ABLE program better than she can, so I want to show you this very short clip.
I'm Sara. I'm from Moscow, Pennsylvania. It's not Moscow, Russia. People with disabilities, Down syndrome, and other disabilities deserve to save money for their future, for college or medical needs, and ABLE is for that. I authored a Change.org petition calling for Congress to pass the ABLE Act. To date, it has over 260,000 signatures and counting. Of course, it's very intimidating to meet Congress. My mom used to lobby with me. She died in February. She As one of those champions of ABLE, I feel like I have a mission now. We now have 74 co-sponsors in the Senate and 366 co-sponsors in the House.
The U.S. House has overwhelmingly passed a bill which approves the most sweeping legislation to help the disabled since 1990.
With the passing of this bill, people with disabilities can now open tax-free savings accounts.
It will affect as many as 54 million people.
It was really, really cool to see all these people come together and support something that is very important for people with disability. I will be standing right next to President Obama when he signs the ABLE Act in July this year. All I gotta say is just keep changing the world. That's it.
So that's a little bit about my friend Sara. She's living with her dad in Moscow, Pennsylvania. She has a new mission now that the ABLE Act is passed. She actually texted me on Friday. It's to meet J.J. Watt. That is her new mission in life. She keeps trying to help me, recruit me to help make that happen. So you heard a little bit about Sara's journey. The ABLE Act was really something that came about around a kitchen table. Sometimes you're in this crazy town, you hear about the best ideas being from real people. Well, the idea for the ABLE Act started in 2006 and 2007 and actually grew out of a kitchen table conversation. One of our local Down syndrome affiliates at the time, 5 parents were talking after a local board meeting. They were frustrated about those same inequities that I talked to you about with Casey. Why can I save for my children that don't have disabilities and 529s and different retirement vehicles and savings vehicles, but for my children that are going to need a little bit extra support throughout their lifetime, I'm penalized from doing so. So one thing led to another, and one of those parents around that kitchen table, her neighbor was the chief of staff to a former congressman from Jacksonville, Florida. Brian and I were just talking about the disability community in Florida. And they approached Congressman Andrew Crenshaw from Jacksonville to help become our champion for this legislation. And as you can see, many things in Washington, I think Suzanne and the rest of the team, the NAIFA team, can tell you this, take a little bit of time. It took 8 years and 4 Congresses, but when we passed this ABLE Act, you can see some of the faces that helped make that happen. Some of those faces you might see tomorrow. Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rodgers, who has a son with Down syndrome. Senator Bob Casey from the Finance Committee was one of our lead Democrat champions. And Sara's petition, which garnered almost 400,000 signatures, took the interest or got the interest of the New York Times. And so many advocates made their voices heard on this small, small tax bill for people with disabilities. The tweet heard around the world was probably one of the best days of our life when Speaker Boehner announced that we would have a vote on the House floor for the ABLE Act as a standalone piece of legislation. On December 19, 2014, President Obama did sign that bill into law. And when it passed, we had 85% of the entire Congress support the ABLE Act. That was 381 out of 435 U.S. representatives, 78 out of 100 U.S. senators, and we had everybody supporting this tax bill for people with disabilities from Bernie Sanders to Jim Jordan. It was pretty absolutely incredible and a huge testament to our advocates all across the country. The ABLE Act, because we amended tax policy, is hailed as one of the most bipartisan, significant pieces of legislation since the Americans with Disabilities Act. Since 2015, we had to take our march from Washington to state capitals all across the country. We've passed over 45 state ABLE laws, and that doesn't even count some of those minor fixes that we've made along the way. And federally, the ABLE Act has been improved 4 times since we initially passed it. In 2015, we allowed every person with a disability to open up an ABLE account, regardless of what state you lived in. We had 2 key provisions that I'll talk about in the 2017 tax bill. And then in December of last year, we just expanded the age of eligibility from the disability occurring from age 26 to age 46. So pretty significant in terms of our trajectory of the ABLE landscape. So let's talk a little bit about ABLE by the numbers. So over 46 states in the District of Columbia offer ABLE accounts. The majority of those are run through the state treasurer's offices, and I'll talk about that here momentarily. Today, we have 144,000 ABLE accounts across the country with over $1.4 billion in assets. Now that's pretty incredible for the first ABLE account opening up in the state of Ohio in June of 2016. This is a very new program. While you see those numbers and you see the number of accounts and those assets under management, let me show you the magnitude of what could be by doing more presentations and more outreach about the ABLE program. 1 in 4 Americans have a disability in this country. Today, while you see 144,000 ABLE accounts, 8 million people with disabilities are eligible to open up an ABLE account today. That number will increase to 14 million in January of 2026 with that increase of eligibility from 26 to 46. And almost 40 million caregivers in this country are caring for an adult over the age of 18 with a disability. So I'm just hugely grateful for the opportunity to talk about this program because I am sure there is a client or a neighbor or a colleague or somebody you work with that could learn and benefit from the ABLE program. Last year, because of the kind of slow uptake we have in the ABLE program, we teamed up with the National Association of State Treasurers, another wonderful association that works in the state treasurer community, to launch a new initiative called ABLE Today. And with the generous support of Wells Fargo, who has no skin in the ABLE game, really just there to help promote financial literacy in the disability community, we launched ABLE Today as a new resource to provide this free education and outreach all across the country to promote the ABLE program. ABLE accounts, and I'm going to go through some of the nuances, the ins and outs of ABLE accounts, have many different benefits, from short-term savings accounts and long-term savings accounts to the opportunity to have that financial empowerment. If you do already work with somebody with a disability, you're going to hear that term spin down, and I can come back to that here momentarily. The ownership. As we were advocating and lobbying for the ABLE account, ABLE program and ABLE Act for those 8 years and 4 Congresses, it was really, really important for the individual with a disability to own the ABLE account, to have that self-determination. These are very easy to use, and every state has different tax benefits that also create new incentives for people with disabilities to open up ABLE accounts. I mentioned that I talk about the eligibility. So right now, as we sit here today, ABLE accounts are for those individuals where the disability occurs or the disability onset occurs before the age of 26. That will increase to 46 in January 1st of 2026. That's a lot of 26s. The disability, the definition of disability must be longer than a year. And you can see here, we use the Social Security Administration disability definition. You can be eligible to receive SSI or SSDI, but you don't necessarily need to be on those benefits. So you just have to meet the definition and don't necessarily need to meet or be accessing SSI or SSDI. I mentioned ABLE Today and the resource that we provide. So as you work all across the country and you work with clients, almost every single state has an ABLE program. And through ABLE Today, we offer this resource to encourage individuals with disabilities, their family members, and their caregivers to go and research your home state first. So this website, abletoday.org, and then /able-programs, offers a whole repository of all the ABLE programs across the country. ABLE accounts allow you to enroll from anywhere. Again, these are built off the 529 program. You can go online and enroll online, or obviously with a paper application. Very flexible. Like the traditional 529 program, general banking functions, different futures, rollovers. So one of those tax provisions that we passed in 2017 for your clients that maybe become disabled a little later in life, or get that diagnosis of autism a little later in life, you can actually roll the traditional 529 into an ABLE account without any tax consequences. That was a great addition that we had to just improve the ABLE program as a whole. Many people want to know, how do you get money in and how much can you contribute to your ABLE account? So we learned something from many years of modernizing this archaic disability landscape, is that we need Congress to go back and adjust how much a person with a disability can get into that ABLE account over time. So that's actually attached to the gift tax rule. You can put in a calendar year $17,000. That actually just went up from 2022 to 2023 to $17,000. Now, I mentioned 4 times ABLE has been improved because of the grassroots advocacy of the disability community. One of those other provisions that we passed in the tax reform package in 2017 was to incentivize people with disabilities to save their own paychecks. So if you are employed over the age of 18, you can actually put an additional $13,000, $14,000 into your ABLE account in that calendar year. And then there's some nuances for those living in Hawaii and Alaska where those are a little bit increased. The amount of the lifetime cap or the lifetime balance on an ABLE account is subject to the state where you open up that ABLE account. So if you're in Missouri, it's a Missouri limit. If you're in South Carolina, it's a South Carolina limit, and that is the 529 limit. And as you can see, the average balance size is about $400,000. Once the account reaches $400,000, it will still grow with those investments. And if you spin down, say you purchase a home out of that ABLE account, then you can build that account back up over time. So there's a lot of incentives. You heard my friend Sara talk a little bit about back in the day what she planned to use her ABLE account for. This is actually my favorite thing to talk about, because Congress and working with the Treasury and the IRS really intended and helped us maintain the spirit of the original ABLE account. And ABLE really is meant to be utilized for those daily expenses that can be correlated back to the disability. These are very, very broad. Housing, rent, assistive technology, just basic living expenses, financial management, transportation, health, wellness, education, legal fees, to hire a special needs planner, to open up your special needs trust, to hire a lawyer to help you do that guardianship. All of these expenses relate back to the disability. I know advocates and families all across the country who have purchased homes out of their ABLE account, have made their homes more accessible out of an ABLE account, who have hired their own job coach. Obviously, one of the things I know you're all focused on and talking about is the caregiving crisis that our community and our nation is facing. To hire your own caregiver, to pay that family to be your caregiver, to go to a Special Olympics meet, to travel, to go on vacation. All of these types of examples relate back to what is a disability qualified expense. It's pretty incredible to see the journey that so many of our advocates have been on as it relates to them utilizing their ABLE accounts on a daily basis. There's a couple of benefits rules that are important to note when you're working with clients with their ABLE accounts. So one thing that was pretty much a concession when we were working on this legislation up until 2014 is that if you're receiving SSI, Social Security income, once the balance on your ABLE account reaches $100,000, You don't go off that benefit, your check is just suspended. And that's really up to the family and the individual based on where they are in their life and maybe their lifespan to figure out, do we need to be receiving that SSI check, which is about $700 to $800 a month? Or if you want to spend down under that $100,000 limit, you can increase it over time. So that is the SSI threshold, really up to the family and the individual on how they choose to increase the assets in their ABLE account or spend that under the $100,000. Back to that kitchen table conversation in 2006, 2007, the frustration of the families being able to not have assets and earn income. Your Medicaid is never impacted. So that's very, very important for the individual with a disability to be able to save assets and never put their Medicaid in jeopardy. This is such an important point. Now, with some states, there's the Medicaid payback that's still into effect, meaning once the beneficiary passes away, the resources in the ABLE account could be clawed back by Medicaid. But I have to tell you, there is a movement, at least 10 to 15 states have eliminated their Medicaid payback, and we're looking at doing that federally as well. This obviously is super important to your community. We really want ABLE accounts and special needs trusts to work together. I work with a lot of special needs planners all across the country, in Kansas City, on both coasts, and small towns, to do this joint education, to talk about how special needs trusts and ABLE accounts can work together. You see a lot of different benefits of both of these accounts, and we really encourage any individuals and any families that are in a position to have a special needs trust to work with their ABLE account in tandem. One of the things that we'll offer to you is we're happy to provide webinars and joint educational opportunities, whether those are in person or virtually or at different conferences, to talk about how these two accounts and how these two financial tools can work together. So yeah, I'll go to the next slide. I'm really excited to have Alex here and to bookend with my friend Rachel, who will be your next speaker, with two incredible organizations that I wholeheartedly support. Just a couple weeks ago, after a year in the making, and as part of the spirit of DE&I, Able Today and NAST joined forces with SHRM, Alex's organization, and the Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy. I think the day we were actually prepping for today's conference, we announced this news. And that's to include and really push out and support this new diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility pledge from our three organizations. And so ABLE is just another tool in the toolbox, but there's such a great opportunity for employers to also promote ABLE accounts to your workforce. So we do a lot of partnerships and a lot of education with employee resource groups and business resource groups to provide this information and this outreach. In fact, this is a lot of how the synergies between Able Today, NAST, and NAIFA came together is after an ERG training we did with Transamerica a couple of months ago. We work with HR departments to ensure that ABLE and ABLE education and payroll deduction are part of the onboarding process. ABLE accounts also have a payroll deduction aspect to it, which is all on our website, where HR departments can encourage family members and caregivers, as well as the individual with a disability, to deduct their paycheck into their ABLE account. And then we also work with employers, large, medium, and small, to offer matching programs to create new incentives for people with disabilities and their caregivers to save in their ABLE accounts for the future. You can certainly go onto our website to learn more about the pledge and obviously access some of our free education, our training, and our onboarding process. Before I kind of wrap up, we are just so excited and honored to be able to provide ABLE account outreach and education to you all. We don't want the conversation to stop here. We know that there are so many self-advocates, family members and caregivers that can benefit from this information. So please, please, please use Able Today as a resource. You can go on our website. We have tons of information about the program. We can break it down state by state. We want you to spread the word to your clients, to your neighbors, to your friends, to folks in your family that may benefit or be eligible for an ABLE account. And we want to provide deeper dives into ABLE 101 education and training. We can certainly work with you to customize a presentation to your employer, to your clients, to partner on that ABLE education and that special needs planning future for the disability community. This is my contact information. Please get in touch with us. We're just so honored and excited to be here and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.